I know you've got an ear out for the start of the podcast, but before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to remind you to keep an eye out for Darryl Lee's limited edition Christmas treats, because they're in stores now. Like the iconic Christmas nougat pudding, so yummy and a gorgeous little gift. And some delicious Chrissy-themed twists on your favourite treats, like the Darryl Lee Rockley Road with chewy red and green jelly pieces, green and red crunchy milk chocolate balls, my favourites, and green apple and strawberry flavoured licorice. Watch them disappear. Your Christmas treats table will pop with colour and scrumptiousness. Spread some joy, bring the fun, and enjoy the Christmas tradition that is Darryl Lee. Hurry before they sell out. Darryl Lee makes Christmas better. Welcome to The Five of My Life with me, Nigel Marsh. As an author, adman and theologian, I've always been interested in people's stories. Not just those with a high profile, but people from all walks of life, regardless of fame. Which is why I created this show. Each guest who takes the Five of My Life challenge chooses a favourite film, book, song, place and possession. They tell me their choices in advance so I can research them, but they don't tell me why they've chosen them. That's the subject of our conversation. It's amazing what you can learn when discussing someone's 5 choices. I hope you enjoy listening to the show as much as I enjoy making it. I adored this conversation with Kris. He's a hugely successful actor whose many loved roles can tend to obscure the reflective deep thinker behind them. Warm, open and often unexpected in his comments, Kris was very gracious in doing this interview on his holiday as I bollocksed up the recording I had done with him at his house previously. So Kris, welcome again to Five of My Life.
Thank you very much, Nigel. It's good to be back.
How is the snow?
I got in late last night, so I haven't sampled it yet. Right after we get off this, strap on some planks of wood to my feet, and I'm going to head up the mountain. So, but it looks good. It looks pretty good. I think conditions are pretty good, actually.
And are you an accomplished skier, or are you an amateur?
I would say somewhere in between. I'm a passable skier.
Okay, so black runs don't hold any fear for you, type thing.
No, I'm all right on a black. I'm not the greatest off-piste skier because I'm tall. And I just look like a grasshopper on 2 planks of wood. Really.
How tall are you, by the way?
6'2". Not super tall.
Not laughable.
Not model tall, I like to say.
You look good in a suit. I've been doing my research. I've been seeing all the pictures. Now, on Five of My Life, it is traditional that we start with our guest's film, and you have chosen one of Five of My Life's absolute favourites. It's one of my personal all-time favourites. You've chosen With Nail and I. Could you tell us, please, why you have chosen that on Five of My Life?
Well, thank you, Nigel. So I guess in a way, for an actor, it's a sort of a bit of a tropey choice, but it does have more meaning, and it does resonate more than just the fact that it's 2 wannabe British actors in a flat in Camden in 1969. Basically, I'll go back to when I was first introduced to the film. When I got kicked out of school, and then, and I kind of thought to myself, well, what am I going to do? And then I thought, well, I've always enjoyed a bit of the acting, so I thought I'll try and give that a go. I'll give it 5 years. I went to this sort of stage school place in Maidenhead in the UK called Red Room. It's a lovely place, but completely wrong for my choice of career, because it was a stage school, and they were more, into doing songs from Les Mis than doing Brecht and Chaucer. But I met some really good people there, and I met 2 guys who were huge Beatles fans. And George Harrison produced through Handmade Films With Nail and I.
Yeah.
So they introduced me to this film, and obviously it's just an amazing film. It's every line is quotable. It's one of those films that's turned into a cult. So and of course it resonates with any young, broke, wannabe up-and-coming actor. But more than that, for me, it has a sort of extra twist on it, because the play that the character of I, who I believe is called Marwood, the character of I, played by Paul McGann, he's reading for a play at the beginning of the film, which he eventually, spoilers, I'm sorry, but he eventually gets the play, and then that kind of breaks up their sort of friendship. That he goes off and does this job. The play he's reading for is a play called Journey's End by R.C. Sheriff. It's a First World War play. Was first performed in the 1920s in London with Laurence Olivier in the lead role. And it's actually a play that I did, but I didn't just do the play. It's a play I did when I was literally on my arse, and I was working as a builder's assistant, and not a very good one. And I got this play underneath a pub in Chelsea, in London, and I would finish work at 5:00. And I'd be covered in brick dust or dirt or whatever it was we were working on that day. And then I would get in my car, drive up to London about 20 miles. And then I would get into my First World War costume. I'd nip up to the bar, I'd have half a lager. And I'd come downstairs and I'd do this play to about 20 people underneath a pub, where if Chelsea, who were the local football team, were playing upstairs and it was on the TV and they scored, then people would stamp on the floor of the ceiling, which added a sort of certain puissance to our First World War trenches play. But during a performance of that play, to which I was paid, I think, £10 a week, an American guy who ran a very famous off-West End theatre called King's Head Theatre in Islington. He came to see the play and he said, I want to take this play to the King's Head, but I want to keep the young guy, which was me at the time. And he said, but I want to get 2 more names for the other 2 leads. So he took me with the play to the King's Head Theatre, where it became a bit of a hit, actually. And so started the ball rolling on my career. And so it was a real sort of foundation of my career. And so I feel, I mean, not just the fact that it's a brilliant film and it has so many quotable lines, is that the performances are amazing. It resonates with me as well.
It's wonderful to hear that angle on that film. I mean, in researching it, I mean, I've watched it hundreds of times and now researched it twice because another actor actually chose it and had a different spin on it. But the thing that stuns me is it's all true. Bruce Beresford, David Dundas, and Vivian, whatever he was called, Mackerel. I mean, so the fact that it resonates with you, it's not just brilliant and funny and well acted. It's obviously reflective of a certain time and a certain career.
Well, of course. I mean, any decent comedy is rooted in truth.
Yeah.
Bruce Robinson, he sort of condensed 3 years of his life into those sort of 2 or 3 weeks. But it is all true. And he directed it and wrote it. So you can really sense what it was like to be an actor in the late 60s, and also how it still is, I think. I mean, I don't know how it is now, but certainly how it was in the early 90s. It was... I used to have a pair of quite fancy Chelsea boots, which were sort of part of the actor's uniform in the late 80s and early 90s. And I wore a hole through them from walking, because you just walk everywhere, because you can't afford trains, you can't really afford buses, and I certainly didn't have a car. So you just walk everywhere, and I'd wear a hole in the sole of them, and then use the cardboard from Weetabix packets to... to sort of, and then that would work pretty well until it rained. And then the cardboard insert would just get soggy and you'd have to replace it.
I have to ask you, obviously one of the themes, and Richard E. Grant, what a performance, but it is drink plays a massive role, in real life, I would imagine, for many aspiring actors, but obviously in the film. How is your, I haven't had a schooner for 20 years, how is your relationship with drink then? Were you always on the terps as a young actor?
I would say less so when I was a younger actor, because of just the cost. Right. So we would pool our resources more. What was cheap at the time was more recreational substances, which feature in the film as well. Yeah. That was always cheaper. So, no, I would say my relationship with alcohol was okay in those days. It sort of got more complicated as I got older.
So you're living your life in reverse.
Well, I don't know about that. It sort of got more complicated as I got a little bit older. And then I had kids, and it got even more complicated for a while. And then it sort of got better. I would say I've walked pretty close to that line of checking out, and going, that's enough, I can't do this anymore. I enjoy it, and when I do have a handle on it, it's a healthy thing for me. So thus far, it's a better relationship now.
Well, that's the perfect link. You chose a film on Five of My Life where the main character is always on the terps, and you've chosen a book where the main character, it turns out, was always on the drugs. You've chosen It's Not About the Bike, 2000, Lance Armstrong's autobiography. I cannot wait to hear why you've chosen this book, and I've got a confession to make, mate. In my third book, the 12th chapter is entitled "Fuck Off, Lance Armstrong." So I'm open-minded. Tell us why you have chosen It's Not About the Bike.
Well, I mean, this is interesting because this this is proper anthropological study. It's not just looking back at history and going, wow, and trying to sort of place yourself in that history. I mean, this is happening and changing all the time. This is a moving beast. What's particularly interesting to me is I first read the book, It's All About the Bike, in 2005, 2006, because I sort of voraciously consume my two favourite subjects are documentaries and sport.
Right.
And so this was perfect for me because here was this sort of Leviathan, this sort of superhuman beast, wonderfully battled back from life-threatening, life-curtailing illness to not just ride professionally again, but be the best ever, to be all-consuming, a 7-time Tour de France winner. And anyone who's ever been on a bike knows that it's pretty tough. I mean, I live in Bath in the UK, which is a pretty hilly place. And I like a bike. I go out on my bike quite a lot. And you have to be supremely fit. I'm not. But you have to be supremely fit to undertake anything remotely close to endurance racing on a bike. It's one of the most extreme sports. It's also one of the only sports I can think of where you need to lose more weight to get more fit, apart from maybe being a jockey. You have to sort of have the weight-strength ratio of like an ichneumon fly or something like that. It's incredible. And so I was so in awe of this man's book when I first read it. And I was like, wow, this man's incredible and gregarious and, arrogant. But that's okay. If you won the Tour de France 7 times, then you're allowed to be arrogant. And then, of course, I watched a documentary, I think, in 2012. A documentary came out with all of his ex-teammates from the US Postal Service team, Frankie Andrew, his wife, Betty Andrew, and the whole edifice starts to crumble. And to see it happen in real time, having enjoyed that book so much and believed what the ethos of the man, and that's just me as a layman. I mean, imagine the people who are really into cycling or, the people who work for his cancer foundation. This whole edifice crumbling away in front of your very eyes. It's like seeing a sort of revolution. And then, since that documentary and the Oprah interview and the whole edifice and being stripped and cast out and being this sort of huge social pariah, going from massive hero to absolute zero. It's just so interesting to me. I think it's inherent in human nature to sort of, I don't know, it's not lascivious pleasure, but it's sort of it's the old thing of rubbernecking an accident when you drive past it on the motorway, or it's such a sort of base human aspect that it's wonderful to see. I kind of sort of I almost revel in it. I'd love to play a character like that. In fact, I do love playing characters like that who just have this huge secret that they carry around with them, and then the whole edifice starts to crumble. And and then what's amazing is since the documentary, there's been another documentary just called Lance, which has come out in the last couple of years, which is just his take on the whole situation, and that is quite something to behold because. Look, I guess everybody was taking performance-enhancing drugs and EPO and all those kind of, and adrenaline, all this kind of thing. So it's sort of weird to me. It's sort of, does that make it worse or does that make it okay? I mean, it doesn't excuse it, but...
But it makes me want to ask, the notion of separating the art from the artist. So lots of stuff that Lance said in that book are still valid, even though he was lying and cheating. And if it moves into your category of work and talent, is there's something that confronts me. So am I supposed to now not like Kevin Spacey's performance in Glengarry Glen Ross, which was sensational, because of certain things that are now revealed about him as a man, or am I allowed to still think it's fantastic? And I sort of feel, but I haven't worked it through, that, well, of course I'm allowed to still think it's fantastic. You know, what do you do if you find out that, I don't know, some actor's got an appalling secret?
It's the sort of $25 million question, really. I mean, I think you can separate the work from the person, because they're two different things.
So do I.
I think what world do we live in? We hold incredible figures through history in great vaunted opinion and put them up on pedestals, but we have no idea really of their true nature as a person, because people just weren't exposed in those days because of the lack of information. There really is, through, you know, for better or for worse, and both arguments are valid for that, but social media and the sort of proliferation of Big Brother in our lives, you know, has sort of exposed everybody to the degree where secrets don't necessarily go with you to the grave. So are people worse now than they were 200 years ago? Of course they're not. Probably they're better. Do people get away with it less? Yes. So, you know, who's to know that Shakespeare wasn't, you know...
And if we found out he was, does it make Hamlet any less good? Probably not.
Exactly. Do you suddenly stop performing Hamlet or rip down the Rose Theatre or the Globe? Sorry, not the Rose. Yeah. Rose has been gone 400 years. But the Globe Theatre, do you know what I mean? Do you tear that down? You can't erase history. And by the way, I don't think anything has been proven about Kevin Spacey.
Okay, so, right. Allegedly, I should have said, yeah.
Allegedly, yeah. So absolutely, these people's, their merits have gone. But, you know, did you stop watching Miramax films because Harvey Weinstein's name is on the...
That's right.
Is on the title? No, because they're great films.
Having mentioned Spacey just by coincidence, is you played his role in Glengarry Glen Ross on stage?
Yeah, John Williamson, yeah.
Yeah, that play is a piece of perfection. There's not a spare word in it. How was that experience for you?
It was Christian Slater. It was a great cast, but it's an incredibly... lean play. The words have been honed. There's no fat on it whatsoever, and it's so visceral. And actually, playing the character I played, and if you know the play, you know, Williamson is not the most popular character in the play.
Indeed not.
So to do that play, and you do it 8 times a week on stage. So I reckon we must have done that play 150 times, 160 times. And doing that play day after day after day, which is a proper study in 80s toxic masculinity. It sort of starts, all plays really, when you do them enough, through a sort of state of osmosis. You start to take on the character you're playing.
Oh no! Lovable Kris became a twat.
Unfortunately, I was with a very good cast of people, and we all got on brilliantly and had a great laugh. So that, I don't think, happened. But what did happen is there's a speech in the play that Ricky Roma says to Williamson at the end. Yeah. Which is so cutting. It's a proper takedown of Williamson and his character. That sort of started to sort of bleed into both of us, I think.
Right.
It's not that you take it personally. It's just that, you know, you're so, I guess because the play's good.
Yeah.
And because the words have such impact, that if you keep doing it enough, it starts to sort of permeate into your being. No one really comes off well out of that play.
I'm going to liberate you and move you to the 70s, where your song on 5 My Life has been chosen from. And you've chosen it from one of the albums that a number of respected people claim is the greatest album ever recorded.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, it's Pink Floyd's 10th album, Animals, inspired by George Orwell's Animal Farm.
Pink man, pink man, I shall ride you out.
Oh my God, Pigs, 3 different ones. It's mind-bendingly good, mind-bendingly clever and thought-provoking. I've had it on just shuffle for the last 4 days. It is a sensation. Tell us about why you have chosen that.
This is probably the hardest of the 5 subjects to choose. A song that represents your life, or the way you look at life. You know, because your choices are boundless, and and different songs. I think more than anything, songs represent periods in your life. I think that's why they're so powerful in film, because they sort of demarcate your life, and they have this uncanny ability to take you back straight away back into whatever part of your life that is, which I think nothing else can.
Yeah.
So the reason it's Pink Floyd is because I went to a very bucolic, pastoral country primary school in the west of England till I was 11. I had like 90 kids there. It was very Laurie Lee. It was very sort of Cider with Rosie, kissing in haystacks. And then I got sent to, because my dad's job, he was with the RAF, so he would get posted abroad often. I got sent to this sort of middling English boarding school. And I was very green, very naive. But when I got there, everyone there seemed to have the most esoteric, precocious taste in music. Right. And so from the age of 11, I started listening to obscure Pink Floyd albums, small furry animals gathering in a cave and grooving with a Pict. And you think this is normal, and then it's only sort of later on you come out of school and you go, that was quite precocious, actually. At 11, to be listening to obscure Pink Floyd albums. But whilst at school, I came across the album of Animals. And it was kind of around the time that I read some Orwell. And of course, the two obvious Orwells, 1984 and Animal Farm. But also, I really love a book of Orwell's about his time fighting in the Spanish Civil War.
Oh, wonderful. Buttered toast. We've got buttered toast over here. I love that book.
So all these things. And of course, at the time, I was starting to experience some issues with authority at school and institution, and I was trying to work out in my own head my own feelings when I was about 14 or 15 on institution, and the fact that you can push institution, but institution will always push back, and institution in the end will always win. But what you can do is you can poke it constantly with a stick. And this song to me is sort of the representation of that to me at that age. The people who who are powerful in society, the lawmakers, the bankers, people who are supposedly put in place for your common good. It's bullshit.
Yeah.
It's bullshit. It's fine, I guess, if you subscribe to that as an automaton. You wander through life slavishly following rules, because they're there, not because you agree with them. Of course, some rules are there because it's the morally right thing to do. But there are other rules and ways of thinking that are there to keep the man down, to stop you thinking for yourself, to be a good worker, to be slavishly a good citizen. And that's bullshit. Yeah. And those should be challenged constantly. Throughout history, change has come through people challenging these norms. You have to educate an individual and then let them make their own choices in life. That's how society should work. Because what happens is, if you sort of, what you're asking people to do is what you're doing is and Orwell got this brilliantly. You're sort of empowering your fellow citizen to spy on their fellow citizens. And really, with social media, this is just gone full on. And what you do is you can create a divisive society, and it's so divisive that you need more rules to stop the whole thing falling down. And I think Pink Floyd got that perfectly, and I think they do it brilliantly in all of their songs. I mean, I chose it because it's a bloody brilliant song, and I love to listen to it when I'm driving, especially. But it still stands up now.
If you released it now and it hadn't been released before, it would be a smash hit. It's 11 minutes of brilliance. We're putting it on the 5 My Life Spotify playlist. There's something that you said, Kris, that made me want to pick you up on, because you say institutions will always win, but haven't you recently got, which I'm thrilled, I hope this is true, haven't you recently won against an institution, because part of the bloody phone tapping news of the world thingy, didn't you poke back and win? Please tell me that's true.
Well, I have to tread carefully here, but
okay,
there was no admission of guilt. I did take umbrage against a certain institution and held them to task about it. And I won, yeah.
Good on you, mate. Bloody good on you. Now we're going to move to Lord Alfred Tennyson's favourite spot, or one of them. For the place on Five My Life, you have chosen Kynance Cove on the Lizard Peninsula in Cornwall, England. Could you describe it first for our listeners who may not have been there?
So, Kynance Cove, it's kind of like Middle-earth.
Right.
It's a place, the Lizard Peninsula in Cornwall, in the southwest of England. It's sort of like Italy on its side, if you know what I mean. It's sort of like a bit of a weird boot, and it's got two promontories coming out at the end of it. And one of them is a place called Kynance Cove, and it's a National Trust area, and it's a place where the sea meets on both sides of one beach. So it's sort of, I think what it is, it's an old collapsed cliff, really, with the stack remaining as an island.
Asparagus Island, the wonderfully called.
Is that what it's called?
It's called Asparagus Island, and it's connected by a tombolo, which is a sandy, rocky isthmus. It's an amazing place.
Wow, you've done your research more than I have, but it's an incredible place, and the whole place is covered at high tide, so it's completely inaccessible at high tide. You can only go between half tide and low tide, so you have to know your tide times, otherwise you're going to get caught out. At low tide, it sort of becomes two beaches, and so you sort of feel like the sea is both in front of you and behind you, and you're sort of surrounded on all sides by the Atlantic Ocean, and it's such a mythical place. And of course, there's blowholes and there's little caves, and I first went down there when I was 18. A friend of mine, his mum had this sort of little sort of fisherman's sail loft where they used to store the sails from the fishing boats, and they used to store the salted fish that they used to catch, that still had the written on the beams the number of catch that had been caught of each type of fish each year. So it would have like flounder times 25, 1859, written on the beams, and the salt from the fish had become encrusted into the stone of the building. This place was in a little village called Cadgwith, which is just across the way from Kynance Cove. And so we used to go down there at low tide. Every day we were down there, and we just used to explore this most amazing place. And it's quite a big place, and you can never tire of it. And it's the most beautiful place, because most places in the UK, it being quite a crowded island, they're pretty crowded because everyone else wants to go there as well. But with Kynance, when the tide goes out, and especially when the tide starts to come back in, you kind of get the place to yourself. And it's usually misty, often raining, but the sea has a sort of amazing Cornish blue-green turquoise colour about it. And it's quite violent down there, and it's got this sort of stark beauty about the place that I particularly love. I love the exposure of nature, which we'll touch on in a minute because of my next choice. But, you know, what I particularly love being outside and extreme nature. I love it. The sea, the mountains. It sort of makes me feel both insignificant and significant at the same time. Well,
I tell you, having chosen it, next time I'm over, I am going to go in your honour, because it just looks amazing. And let's go to your fifth and final choice, your possession, because you've chosen a 6'10" Spider Murphy thruster, which I know what it is now, but please explain to our listeners. It's not some hideous sex toy. It's a surfboard.
Well, it might be a sex toy, but we shall discuss. No, it's a surfboard, yeah. So around the time that we went down to Cornwall with my mates when I was about 18. And I just fell in love with the place. I became kind of semi-obsessed with surfing because I've always been such a huge fan, as I just said, of nature and wild nature and the power of nature and how brutal it can be and yet beautiful. And surfing doesn't really come closer to making you feel more insignificant than the power of waves. It's so incredible that this sort of slab of water, what it can do. And I just became obsessed with watching waves. And then I was like, well, when I started to earn a few quid, I thought, you know what, I'm gonna learn how to surf. So I got to sort of about 23, 24, and I thought, right, I want to learn how to surf properly. So rather than sort of, doing the thing where you go down to, with a couple of mates, to a surf school and you play around on a sponger in the shallows of in the white water of some beach, I decided to get straight to it. So I went down and I rented a board, and it was a thruster. It was a particular type of board. And I went out in 8-foot seas, which is the most bloody stupid thing to do. And I went out on my own as well. And it was the most bloody stupid thing to do. I nearly drowned. But I also caught my first wave out there, and it was the most beautiful experience. And as I started to sort of do quite well at work, and, the beauty of being an actor is you work hugely intense periods of time, 90, 100 hours a week on film sets, and then you get spat out at the end of your job and the door closes behind you and they go, thanks very much, you're now unemployed, you need to go and find some more work. And so you're sort of in the constant state of semi-retirement, so, but you're young, and if you're lucky enough to have a bit of disposable income, you've got time on your hands and the world is your oyster, and you're like, well, what am I going to do now? So since I've had kids, I don't surf quite so much. I sort of moved it more into sailing and skiing. I still love surfing, but it batters you. And also, it's a thing that you need to do really every day or every week. Yep. If you're not surf fit, you can't surf really. So, and I don't really live near close to the coast. So, but what I did was I went out and bought this board, this 610 thruster, and I proceeded to take it all around the world with me. And it is the most cumbersome thing to take with you. And so it's sort of a bit of a poisoned chalice in a way. I love that board because I've surfed it in Oz, I've surfed it in Hawaii, I've surfed it in Bali, Portugal, of course Cornwall. I've surfed it in so many different places. But I really think that I must have only caught about 3 good waves on it in 12 years. And so...
Do you have it hanging up in home at Bath, or where is it now?
It's now in my garage. It's so dinged, and it's got a crack in the fiberglass down the back. It's that I kept surfing on it with a crack in it. So the water got inside the polyurethane or whatever it is, filler, i.e. splitting the fiberglass casing even more. It's ruined. But I can't seem to want to get rid of it. I still think I still sort of think in the back of my mind, I'm going to revert back to my late 20s and, load up a rucksack and my Spider Murphy and head off to some random island near Borneo or something and go surfing. It's not going to happen. I chose it because I think it's synonymous with travel for me. It's representative of a freedom I had before I had kids, and how lucky I've been as well in that I've been able to do a job that I love and that gives me time off where I can go off and have adventures. And even though I've been walking around airports around the world lugging this 7-foot surfboard around that I've caught looking, like Kelly Slater, but really in reality I've surfed about 3 good waves on it. It's sort of it's sort of every time I look at it, it's so representative of my late 20s and early 30s, and I can't bear to get rid of it.
Can I say, Kris, you have been an absolute angel telling your stories on Five My Life. You've taken the format seriously. I've just loved listening to you. The story about feeling bad about yourself because of Christian Slater, the story about your surfboard reminding you of your youth. I'm going to let you get on the slopes, but I'm going to ask you 3 additional questions if you don't mind.
Please do. Can I just say, before you say, it's been an absolute pleasure to see you again, albeit over bandwidth. But I've really enjoyed it. I love the podcast. I really love the format. I think it works beautifully, and I've had a great time. Hopefully, when you get back over to the UK, we'll get together for a large cup of tea. And I've had a brilliant time. Thank you.
Oh, mate, that's very nice of you to say. Okay, so the first question is you can choose. It's a bit of a double, which is what is your biggest regret or mistake? And on a positive thing, thing that you might have learnt from or whatever else, or not.
Yeah, my biggest mistake. Oh gosh, that's a really tough question.
How many?
How many? Yeah. But also, I'm thinking about what's going to be palatable for a podcast. Can I come back to that, mate? I'm going to come back to that.
Yeah. Well, so the second one is, what do you wish people understood about you? Now, for people who aren't as, I mean, I know you and I really admire you and your work, and I've been researching you, but for people who aren't as familiar with you as I am, you are enormously successful, enormously high profile. Whether it's My Family, whether it's Death in Paradise, whether it's the BT campaign. I read a thing saying it united the nation. It will never be forgotten. You've got a big profile and you are loved, and sometimes, a bit like Richard E. Grant saying people still shout scrubbers at him once a week from With Nell and I, and that might not be where his head is at 40 years later. If you've got the talking stick, is there something that really pisses you off that you go, I really wish people understood this about me?
Yeah, I would say what I try and do with my characters is make them, utterly believable, but also flawed. The thing that most interests me really about creating a character or playing any kind of character is how flawed people are. For example, the character in Love Actually, I wanted to make a character who was the least attractive person that you could possibly come across. Someone, that's the whole point of the joke. The whole joke is the least attractive man. I mean, I'd never seen anybody pick their nose on celluloid before. So I thought, I'm going to have a character who picks their nose, because people do it in real life. I've always thought, as an actor, you've got to park your ego at the door. I mean, actually, that was a lot easier when I was younger than it is now, weirdly. But the older you get, the more you want to protect yourself. I don't know. But what I wish often is that people don't assume or presume that I'm anything like the characters I play.
Right.
Both in a sort of in a good way, but also I'm not always as approachable as you might think I am either.
Yeah.
I mean, I love it when people come up and are nice, but you get some people who just it's weird. They sort of, and also time moves on. Some of the work that people recognise you from is 20 years old.
Yeah.
And they sort of come over and they look at you and they go, "You don't look like you did." I go, "Well, you don't look like you did 20 years ago either."
I'm so glad to hear. Thank you for taking that question head on, because it must be. I mean, I don't know if Alan Partridge isn't probably Alan Partridge in real life. I mean, but people think that they see you on the telly or the big screen, so they know you. So it must be it must be wearing on the nerves.
But I will say, Nigel, it's a small price to pay for all the great things that you get in that position. I mean, I don't want to seem ungrateful. It is a small price to pay. But yeah, it's a little wearing sometimes.
So I'm going to come back to the first question in a second. I'm going to ask you the third question next, which is, who would you like to hear on Five of My Life next, Kris?
I think I'd love to hear Richard E. Grant.
Oh, my word. I would adore to hear his stories. God, okay.
He's had an incredible life. He grew up in Swaziland, and he had an incredible childhood, and then obviously he's had this amazing career. But also, you know, in the last sort of 5 years, he's had a real renaissance in his career. It's heartening to see that as an actor. And now you're going to ask me about this regret.
I'm going to hold your feet to the fire, Marshall. Come on, you must have one regret, one mistake.
There was one mistake. I shouldn't have had. The one mistake was I shouldn't have had the extra rum and coke I had the night I got run over in Bristol.
Wow. Well, that's you got run over. I mean, badly?
I was sedated in intensive care for about a week.
Oh, blimey.
A punctured lung, about 8 staples in my head. It was pretty messy. It would have been a lot messier, but I instinctively tried to jump out of the way, as you would when you're about to be hit by a car. And so I kind of avoided, because I was in the air when the car hit me, I kind of avoided the worst of the injuries. But it was completely my fault. I was on a stag do, and I'd had a really great day, but I hadn't eaten enough, and we went straight out drinking, and I wish I hadn't had that last drink.
So that is, Five of My Life isn't instructional, but I do like to think under the radar we are enlightening and elevating. So we have a jewel there. Is after the 15th rum and coke, sack the 16th. Pour it in the pot plant. Don't have the 16th rum and coke.
It was actually more like the 4th. It was a particularly poor show on an empty stomach. So yeah, my mistake was always lie in your stomach on a stag do.
I love it. Kris Marshall, you are a dead set legend. Thank you for the work that you do. I hope the snow is sensational today. I hope when you get back home you have more jobs and offers than you know what to do with. You're beating them off with a shitty stick. And I hope to see you in the next couple of years, maybe even at Kynance Cove.
I look forward to that. Thank you, Nigel. I've had a brilliant time.
Thank you for listening to The Five of My Life, presented by me, Nigel Marsh. Our producer is Mandy Coolan. Theme music is thanks to Darcy Thompson and Matt Nicholish. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please share with a friend. And if there's someone you'd like to hear take the challenge, please message us on the Five of My Life Instagram page. I love hearing from you and appreciate all your suggestions.